Welcome to COIQ, where you learn how health innovators maximize their success. I'm your host, Dr. Roxy, founder of Legacy DNA and international best-selling author of How Health Innovators Maximize Market Success. Through candid conversations with health innovators, early adopters, and influencers, you'll learn how to bring your innovation from idea to startup to market domination. And now, let's jump into the latest episode of COIQ. Welcome back to the show, COIQ listeners. On today's episode, I have Pradeep Goel with us with SolveCare. He is the CEO and co-founder. Welcome to the show, Pradeep.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, start off by telling our listeners a little bit about your background and what you've been innovating lately.
I have spent my entire career in healthcare. Healthcare found me very early on in my career when I was just leaving university. And I've spent my career really working on improving it from a patient perspective or from a physician perspective or from an administrative perspective. And along the way, I've had the good fortune of working with some really amazingly smart people as well as governments. I've been exposed to the healthcare perhaps in more dimensions than most people ever will be. So this has been an honor, a privilege to be part of the healthcare system. So
you've seen things change quite a bit.
Yes, and I've seen things not change as they should have as well. You know, in some ways, healthcare can be maddeningly resistant to change.
Yeah.
At the other time, you see change happen because it must. I mean, there have been some very fundamental changes in healthcare, but I think far more needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. And so what is the solution that you've been working on most recently?
So SolveCare was started about 3 years ago with the notion that a lot of the fundamental issues that emerge from the fact that the healthcare is operated on back-end systems that are not for the patient, by the patient, and essentially engage the patient. I have personally overseen the building out of large eligibility systems, claim systems, payment systems, and HRMs and EHRs, and so on and so forth. But really, in all those models, we are too obsessed with, okay, my insurance company should talk to your hospital system, and your hospital system should talk to the pharmacy system in the service of the patient. But we rarely engage the patient in that process, but they're supposed to be beneficiaries of care, recipients of care. But frankly, that model leads to all kinds of unwanted circumstances and outcomes where we do not engage the person that matters. We do not serve the person the way the person wants to be served. And having overseen billions of dollars invested in IT under my watch or participating in projects big and small, I came to the conclusion that we seem to be swapping colors. Blue box today, red box tomorrow. And we keep upgrading our back-end systems with huge cost of operation. Mm-hmm. But end of the day, fundamental model is intact and it's not working. And we continue to have this disconnect between the business processes that drive healthcare and the recipient of healthcare, the patient. So I started to ask myself, how many more times will you do the same system swapping and rewriting the same function to slightly better administrative efficiency? But what? How does it serve humanity? And is that all my learning combined, how does it help the man on the street, the family that needs care? So it caused me to sort of leave the comfortable perch of a corporate world and come back and say, let's start a platform that really serves the consumer, the patient, the father, the son, the granddaughter, the grandmother, and that allows it to coexist with existing infrastructure, because I don't think the answer is to blow everything up and replace it. The answer is to really find those gaps in care and gaps in benefits and gaps in payments that we have not been able to address for the last 50 years. And someone should take that challenge, and someone should pick it up and say, what does patient-centric healthcare actually look like? And more importantly, how does it partner with the existing model of healthcare so we can actually combine the two goals instead of always criticizing healthcare delivery, but not doing anything to change it. So we decided to be a change agent without being a evolution without revolution, but revolution in certain parts of healthcare, working closely with the parts that actually do work today.
So help help me understand what were some of the tactics, or how did you involve patients in this co-creation process? So a lot of innovators don't include this stakeholder group. Sometimes they don't include anyone except for their leadership team involved in the product development process. Those that do include customers or prospects in this process, like you said, very rarely do I hear that the patient is actually being considered, especially early on. So what was that like for you guys?
So we basically, the good news and bad news is that we all were born into healthcare, and the last day of our life, we will be in the arms of healthcare more likely than not. So healthcare is in some ways easy to emulate because you are always a patient or a parent of a patient or a son of a patient. So it's not that difficult to ask and receive the answer, whether you're doing a control group or a large group, as to what would be the right way for you to experience healthcare. And over the years, I've been able to ask that question of groups very, very large, like large populations, statewide, program-wide, and also of the inner circles and the closed group. And it always boils down to three key friction points. First is, I need to understand how I can access healthcare. What are my rights and responsibilities and options? And it is difficult to even begin to figure out how to even access the healthcare system. And other than the emergency room visit, which everybody can understand, if you're not in that situation, if that is not the optimal model of care, and it never is the optimal model of care, well, how do I begin the journey of identifying my needs and identifying the supplier and identifying my rights and options? So that's the first thing, which is what you can call in loose terms the healthcare administration side of it. Mm-hmm. The second equation that always comes up is, how do I know I'm getting the optimal care? How do I know that I'm doing everything I can to make myself or my loved ones healthier? And how do I know that the doctor is actually doing everything he should be doing? And this is not a criticism of, is the physician capable? It's a criticism of, is the physician and I fully engaged in the dialogue as we should be? And given that my average time, face-to-face time with my physician is measured in seconds, how do I know that I'm getting the optimal care, and what should I be doing, and what should the physician be reminded of that I need to know? So there is that care coordination element, the care quality element. And the third part that scares most people is, who's going to pay for this? What am I responsible for? What are you responsible for? Am I being billed the right amount? How much is the insurance company or Medicare or Medicaid will cover? Should I use my HSA or should I not? There's far more questions than an average consumer has the facilities to answer. So those three things, when you look at all criticism of healthcare, we all tend to solve the problem in big strokes. Let's go to single payer system. Let's go to fully decentralized care. Let's go to, let's blow up the state boundaries and make everybody, multi-state. Those tend to be more hammer strokes. But the real issue is that we need to make the patient able to understand how to access whatever program they're in, multi-payer, single payer, Medicare, Medicaid, or self-care. You need to understand how to manage your care journey. And this part startles me the most, that as a patient, I do not have a roadmap on where I am and where I need to end up and what are the milestones in between. I'm expected to show up at a doctor, get a prescription, go home, take the drugs, and hope everything falls in place. But it doesn't show me a roadmap on where I am, where I need to be, and what I can do to go from milestone A to milestone B. Why do I not have that option, like a navigation that tells me, for you to avoid disease in later stages of your life, you have a 10-year roadmap that allows you to monitor certain key indicators, and it tells you whether you are on track to dodge the bullet that your parents didn't dodge, diabetes or cancer or Alzheimer's or whatever. So we tend to think of healthcare as curative, but we don't think of healthcare as a responsibility of a patient, as something that they should manage as they manage their finances. And the answer always is given, well, the patient isn't smart enough to think. How come we can manage our finances, our pensions, our investments, our homes, our mortgages, our car insurance, but we are not smart enough to manage our healthcare? I'm sorry, it's nonsense. It really isn't the answer. The answer is we don't provide you the information, and we haven't created a model for patient to be engaged. So that, to me, was a big gaping hole in the overall healthcare mindset. So when I look at those three, I decided that there are many companies trying to solve each of them individually. But there is a codependency between them. Access to care determines quality. Quality of care is colored with the ability to pay. And you can't solve one side of the equation and not solve the others. So we took the bold step of saying, we're going to build a patient-centric platform where the patient has transparency and visibility and actionability on all three areas. The accessibility, the coordination and quality and outcomes, and finally the payment. These three legs need to come together. And yes, it's complex, but then what else is worth doing? If the healthcare is not worth solving, then what is? So we took on this mission of building a true patient-centric platform that we feel can coexist with back-end legacy or even modern systems, but it delivers a last mile connection to the patient and builds a bridge between the patient and all other stakeholders, the doctor, the pharmacist, the employer, the insurer, the broker, the family members who need to support you. And that connectivity, that circle of care is what we decided to build. So our platform launches what we call care networks, which are the networks on which you can coordinate care of a group of people. You can refer to them as population groups. And you can allow peer-to-peer coordination while accounting for the patient privacy and consent and rights of all the stakeholders. And it's a big deal. It's a big challenge because siloed solutions have long been built. Mm-hmm. Once they are built, then there's a lot of money spent or more money spent on interoperability, which is connecting these silos to talk to each other.
Yep.
And it has been the great mission of healthcare for the last 20 years. And I have personally overseen billions and billions poured into this interoperability mantra. But you know what? You will never reach a goal where everybody's system talks to everybody. But when I need healthcare, most likely scenario is that the probability of my physician system talking to every other team player whose care I need is very low. And so we keep pursuing the wrong mantra. So I decided that we're going to build a platform where patient is the interoperability hub. I want to be able to do things that your big interoperability systems cannot achieve. And I'm going to do that with as easily in my care wallet as swiping a card or flicking a deck of cards. So the notion was, let's stop trying to do interoperability through the systems and let's do interoperability through where it actually needs to be, in the hands of the patient. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is a revolutionary thought.
That's very, very exciting, especially a platform business, because I think we need to, continue the conversation about platform companies in healthcare. You see that in other industries, Uber, Airbnb, and we're just starting to scratch the surface, I think, in these platform. And I think they'll be extremely transformative and disruptive, just like you described. It's going to be required for that kind of major disruption in order to really change the system. So for most of our listeners are health innovators that are in the trenches, and what you're describing is something that's very radical, very disruptive to the status quo, and the commercialization strategy for that can be very challenging. Trying to come up with your value proposition in a succinct way that people understand, because it's so unique and disruptive. So let's kind of dig a little bit deeper into the commercialization of a disruptive innovation like this. What, as an entrepreneur, what are some of the cornerstones of building or commercializing a successful innovation?
That's a great question. And certainly there is, depends on the industry you're in and the stage of the industry you're in. But from our perspective, and this is my fifth company that I'm building. So I'm in many ways a serial entrepreneur, although that term is better applied to those who do it every 2-3 years. I tend to take 10 years to build each company up. So not always, but that seems to be the cycle that I go through. And I find that over the years, I've developed a sort of a framework of bringing a company along, because commercialization is not just of the product, but it's also of your organization. Your organization needs to be ready and mature. So I look at companies, every company that I built, as sort of like a multi-stage journey. And the type of things I focus on in stage one, when we are innovating, when we are simply trying to prove that our idea has merit, you bring in a different team around you. that are disruptors and innovators and are not afraid to ask the what if, and are not afraid to try things that are outlandish on surface because nobody's ever done them.
Yep.
You have to bind them together into some kind of a vision. So the 5 things that I worry about is, okay, what is the product we're building? Who is it actually going to serve? Do I have the team that is in a position to envision and build the version of the product that will be disruptive, but also be meaningful enough? Because you don't want to disrupt just for the purpose of disruption.
Right.
You want to deliver value. Then I look for partnerships is my next big concern, which is if I were to have the product in my hands tomorrow, who is the partner I would need to hitch my wagon to? Because particularly when you're an early stage company, no matter how brilliant your idea is, there are certain partners that will either be threatened by you or will be enriched by you. And you better know both of them. If you don't understand who's going to be threatened by you, they'll shoot you down before you realize it. And you need to be able to anticipate that. So you better know your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that actually will be your sponsors who will bring you into deals because you enrich their values proposition, you better know them as well or better. So partnerships are fundamental especially in industries like healthcare as your launch vehicle. Brilliant ideas don't mature into companies without a good capital partner, a good distribution partner, a good delivery partner, a good, whatever you can do, you do well, but the others need to be in the ecosystem. So I focus on the partnerships that will drive adoption. And then you look at the pricing. How are you pricing your product early on is going to be materially different than how you're going to price it later on. The early adopter pricing model has to be compelling enough and yet sustaining enough for you to continue to innovate. And the early adopters, typically understand that you are an early stage product, and they want to step in with you either for the strategic advantage or for the functional advantage that they get, and they have to be able to sustain you. And then finally, you end up with the promotion element of it. You can build the greatest product in the world if nobody knows about it. It's not going to matter. And don't wait for miracles. You're not going to have, we all hear about anecdotes where somebody had a genius idea and they bumped into, the angel investor in the elevator and they became, Mark Zuckerberg. That's not how you plan your life or your company. So you do need to promote carefully, but you have to promote to who you really are, not what you aspire to be, because people will smell the difference between aspiration and reality very, very quickly. So promote who you really are. Are you promoting to your disruption? Are you promoting to your execution? And be clear about that, because then you will attract the right partners.
Mm-hmm.
So those 5 things, people, product, partnerships, pricing and promotion, are what I worry about. And then when you look at these 5 Ps, they change. What you need to understand is which stage are you in, your company is in, so that you can say, I am in the innovation phase. I'm in the early adoption phase. Mm-hmm. I have proven it. I'm in the scaling stage. I'm now in the competitive stage where people are starting to copy me or the industry is maturing to where solutions like mine are emerging. So I need to be in a competitive stage. And then I'm in maybe a maintenance stage where I need to innovate again to get back to the first stage of the cycle again. And the kind of people you hire in stage 1, the early stage, you're not going to need them in the maintenance stage. They're going to be bored out of their mind. And many of them won't even make it to stage 3, because stage 1 is exciting, fun, disruptive. Stage 2 is hard work to take the concept and turn it into a real product. And many of them lose interest because the idea is cool, but the execution requires a grind. And then there's the selling phase when the innovators start complaining, well, the marketing and sales is driving everything. We no longer have the free will. But the fact is you do, but the product has moved to a different stage. You want to have the innovation, go find the next challenge.
Right.
Augment it. But entrepreneurs struggle to make that shift themselves, and then the team doesn't make that shift. Mm-hmm. So that's where you run into issues. But my answer to any entrepreneur would be, do 3 things. Understand your 5 Ps, understand the stage you are in, and align your actions to the stage, because the people, product, pricing, partnerships, and the type of promotion you do about yourself is going to be dramatically different in stage 1 versus stage 3. And some of the people won't carry over, and they shouldn't carry over because this is not what they want to do in their life. So that's basically the roadmap that I follow.
So I completely agree with you. I think it is so mission critical. I talk a lot about this 95% failure rate, and I don't do that to create fear. It's just, it is a reality. Like, the odds are stacked against all of us entrepreneurs and being able to bring an innovation to market. And to me, what you just described is a very, very common pitfall. When people are building their go-to-market, their commercialization strategies, it's very, very rare that I see anyone put the early adoption lens on, or the mainstream market lens. They're most often looking at the entire market as a whole. They might be segmenting the market based upon, is this a decision maker versus a user versus a payer? So there's some market segmentation, but their entire strategic lens isn't what you just described. And so you're setting yourself up for failure right out of the gate because it is so different. So you're spending all this money, all this time, hiring maybe the wrong people with a strategy that is not going to put you on the right path, because it's just so different for early market versus mainstream market.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of that came home to me about 20 years ago when I was making all these mistakes. The conventional wisdom was that you should bring in product managers to manage your product roadmap.
Yep.
And you should have the product managers develop the requirements, and they should be working with the clients. But what I realized after trying to do that, and I was fortunate enough to have built up the company to the point where I could afford to bring in product managers. So I did. And I took my product and I broke it up into sub-tracks, and I put a product manager on each one of them. And it was not a great outcome. And so I had to collapse the product management function back down. And what I realized is that product is very much like a child. There is a reason why infants and toddlers aren't handed over to other kids, other parents to grow them, because they haven't yet matured enough to go out there and be taken care of by others. There is not enough definition to the product or to the child, in this case, as an analogy, where you can say, well, you can sleep over for a week, with your grandma, or you can do it in the summer at their house. You can't, because they're not ready for that independence. So products have the similar kind of cycles where if you bring in people who have the ability to mature the product too early, while you don't want to be mature, where you want to actually be agile and you want to actually be looking for that differentiated value, then you need to have the innovator be leading the product.
Yeah.
But this is a point where you have, let's say, 7 customers on your product, 10 customers in your product, and they are now asking for consistency, and they're looking for configurability, they're looking for support and the defect rate to be down. You bring in product managers now to say, okay, but here is your role, Mr. Product Manager. Your role is to stabilize the versions in production, while my role is to keep looking for the next. So you need to redefine what stage you're in. But if you bring in, same is true with executives. If you bring in too high-powered a COO too early on as an entrepreneur, that CEO is going to want processes and procedures and teams that you can't afford. And even if you could afford it, they're going to get in your way, because you are looking for an execution model that's around the cult of your personality. You're looking for vision supporters. You're not looking for process supporters.
Right.
So understanding when you need to shift the company from vision to process, or when you need to shift the company from being focused on finding the next, highly disruptive value proposition to commercializing that value proposition for the first 5 customers, is entirely different than how you commercialize it for the next 10 customers. Because first 5 customers, you're going to be very innovative in pricing. You're going to have to be. But by the 6th or 7th customer, you will see a pattern to say, now I'm going to publish my standard pricing model, and I'm not deviating too much.
Right.
You will still deviate, but not too much. Customer number 30, I'm putting my price on the web. Come and buy yourself.
Right.
So the point is that you need to know where you are. And if you bring in salespeople who are hunters or gatherers too early on, when you need to have hunters and they are the gatherers, you're going to have a real problem with selling your product, because they want everything bolted down. API, interfaces, products, manuals, boxes,
No bugs.
Sustainable level of bugs, right?
Right. Yeah.
And they want a price sheet and they want a distribution model. And you're like, but I haven't figured this out. You haven't, because you are bringing in the wrong people. So be very careful of what you wish for. Even successful companies that have early revenue, that become profitable early on, run the risk that they fail to see which life cycle stage they are in. And what a teenager can do, a toddler cannot and should not. But what an adult should be doing is a little different than what a teenager does. So you need to think of your product and your company as to what stage in life they are. Because companies, like people, go through maturity models similar to as we grow.
Yep. Hey, it's Dr. Roxy here with a quick break from the conversation. Are you trying to figure out what moves you need to make to survive and thrive in the new COVID economy? I want every health innovator to find their most viable and profitable pivot strategy, which is why I created the COVID Proof Your Business Pivot Kit. The Pivot Kit is a step-by-step framework that helps you find your best pivot strategy. It walks you through 6 categories you need to examine for a 360-degree view of your business. I call them the 6 critical pivot lenses. As you make your way through this comprehensive kit, you'll be armed with the tools, tips, and strategies you need to make sure you can pivot with speed without missing out on critical details and opportunities. Learn more at legacy-dna.com/kit. So you talked about 2 different groups of people. You've got your internal team and you've got your customers. And what I heard you say about customers is that you're going to have those early customers and they can hijack your product if you don't have the right product developer leading the charge, because they will start to shape the features and functionality of your solution. Instead of having something commercially viable, you will have something that is fantastic for those 1 or 2 customers, right?
Absolutely.
Have you had that happen before?
Of course. I mean, the hardest thing to do as a early stage company is to push back on the customer who is writing your paycheck or is at least supporting part of it. Yeah. And also has great domain expertise, because customers tend to know their business really well. So it's very easy for them to say, but this is logical. My business needs it.
Yep.
And the question is not whether they need it. The question is whether you can afford to build it, and should you? And is it really adding to your value proposition? Because very soon you'll find yourself looking like the products they already have.
Yes. You can start off so revolutionary and disruptive and they destroy your new business.
And it's not that they mean to, but they don't have any other core reference.
Right.
So the point for an entrepreneur is very simple. Is what you're doing fundamentally aligned with your value proposition that you wanted to bring to market?
Yeah.
Which is why knowing what stage you're in, if you're in the innovative disruptive stage and you're hooked up to a customer that is in the process stage, they're going to make you look like the product they already know and slightly like and slightly dislike. They're just looking for a better version of the product they already are familiar with. If that's the model you're in, then you need to understand that you are no longer in the disruptive phase. You are in the process stage.
Yeah.
And then your pricing, your business agility, your partnerships, your promotions has to already be aligned with that stage. But most innovators are not there. They're still thinking they're going to disrupt the world while they're building a new dashboard, which 15 million other companies are building.
Right.
So you have to stay true to your value proposition in the stages where your value proposition is your disruption. Yep. And that means saying no to customers. That could be the difference between paying the paycheck or not.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, did you want to do what you said you're going to do? Or are you going to just go ahead and become another outsourcing shop for the client?
That struggle is real. I mean, innovators are facing that every day, that crossroad, that decision. And there's such a mental and emotional gymnastics that happens around that decision-making process.
And I boil it down to the following 3 questions I ask my team. Is the customer interested in the value proposition we have? Maybe not exactly the way we thought of it, but is the customer fundamentally responding to our value proposition? The mechanics can vary, but there's a value proposition there. If they don't even like our value proposition, they like the feature functionality or our development ability or our user experience or whatever, then you have to make a very clear choice that you are going to sell something to a client that is fundamentally misaligned with your value proposition. Can you afford to do it? Sometimes it's worth doing, most of the time it's not. The second question I always ask is, if we deliver this customer, are we going to have residual value derived from this customer other than revenue? And is there residual value aligned with where we are going? If this customer can teach me how to make my core product better, stronger, because it pushes me forward in whatever my disruptive value was, then I think a detour is warranted. But if this detour takes me down a different path, then you have to choose again the same question, back to question number one. Mm-hmm. The third question here is, do we have the actual ability to deliver this customer without closing the door to other customers? Because anytime you become a single customer oriented, you are in deep, deep trouble. Because that customer may pivot for many reasons, internal, external, capital, markets, priority shift, whatever.
Get bought.
The business. Yep. So you cannot go down the path of, everybody dreams of that customer that will redefine their business and launch it. But you don't want to have the customer that defines whether your business will succeed or fail.
Yeah. That is so true. It's so much wisdom. I love what you are saying. It's so rich for our listeners and our viewers. So what do you think, Pradeep? In my mind, as you train, I can imagine that people are asking, like, well, how do I know when I'm shifting between the vision strategy versus the process strategy? I think it's product market fit. Like, when I've reached product market fit, it's like, yes, I have a viable, feasible, desirable solution. Now I can scale it. Now I need these processes. What do you think?
So my view is that two things are determined. One is what is your distribution channel? That should always tell you where you are.
Okay.
The type of distribution channel, the partnerships that you are attracting, and the partnerships that are actually functioning. Don't talk about aspirational partnership. Look at where your revenue or your pipeline of clients is coming from. Mm-hmm. And that distribution channel, whether it's direct sales, the profile of your client and profile of your partner will determine your maturity level. And it's a both cause and effect. They will shape your stage, and they will also tell you what stage you are in, right? Because it's a simple way to measure, where is my revenue coming from? What's the profile of the client? And why are they buying from me? Will tell you what stage you're in. The simplest way for me to determine where we are in a product life cycle is I look at the client profile. I look at the partners profile, the partners that are interested in us, the partners that we are successfully being able to work with, and the ones that are actually bringing us leads and opportunities and revenue. And that typically tells me what stage, because your stage isn't determined just by you. It's also the industry around you. I may be still in a hyper innovation mode, but the industry is already adopting that platform or that product at a very fast pace. Then you better get into the process mode quickly.
Yep.
Because you can't scale if you're highly innovative, disruptive, and to some degree by necessity chaotic, and the market is in a hyper adoption mode. So those things are really important. But there is no single formula, but I tend to look at revenue and partnerships or the distribution channel, another way to look at it, as the key indicator of where we need to be. And then I try to get the company there.
So when we were talking before, you had mentioned a couple of different phrases that I want to talk about here: first to market and first to profit.
Yes. Yeah.
Talk about that.
Again, those are, I think, if you think about it, depends upon your capital base, but most entrepreneurs always think about first to market. I want to be the first to market. And that's more of to me, it feels more like an ego-driven thing. I was the best, the smartest, the coolest. My product came out first. But I find that companies that actually survive and grow and are sustainable tend to focus on first to reach profitability, which then forces them to evaluate their people, their product, their processes, their partnerships, and their pricing.
Yep.
Because you can get to first to market, but not be profitable, so you're the first to fail. You'll be first to market, you're going to make a lot of great innovation, but if your people, product, process, partnerships, and pricing aren't aligned, you're going to go out of business. That's what's going to happen. And then somebody else is going to figure out, what they didn't do right is they priced it too low or too high, or they went after the wrong customer, so I can do it better. And tends to be second tries tend to be better than first try, because we get too excited about being first to market. And I would rather always be first to profit, because it's a magical thing. When you have cash flow, or when even if you're breaking even, you walk taller. You think about different things. You think about things like acquisitions or partnerships. You think about breaking into new markets that require a bit more investment, or you think about raising capital more as a debt than as an equity.
Or telling that customer, no, you're not a right fit for us.
And you can say no to customers when those are not a good fit for you.
Yep.
So I would always say that, people always say revenue, companies should focus on revenue. True, because without revenue, there's no profit. But I would say I would rather be the first profitable company in my segment, which will make me infinitely more valuable than if I was the most innovative company, but I was lagging on profitability and others were more profitable than me. So first to profit is a better model in my mind, but it requires a lot of discipline, because sometimes you have to defer your innovation because the profitability will come through more moving the product into the process stage quicker. And you can innovate when the market profitability will only come if you launch and streamline and standardize. So, but the good thing is that you can run these phases in parallel. You can have a part of your product portfolio in the late third stage, and you can still have part of your portfolio in stage one. As long as you understand what's where, you should be able to manage that. Never easy, but it's a formula. It works.
Yeah. So Pradeep, as we kind of, just continue the conversation here, you've shared a lot of frameworks, a lot of lenses that you use as you're building and growing your business. What are some of the lessons that you've learned, or advice that you would have for our listeners that are in the trenches right now? And some of them have been completely shaken by this pandemic that we're facing, right? Depending on where they were in the growth stage of their company. What advice do you have for them?
So when it comes to the pandemic, I think this is a monumental global disruption. And if you are struggling, don't be disheartened. Everybody is struggling. They're just dealing with it differently. And your goal should be to survive the pandemic and come out of it. And that in itself is an achievement. Even for companies big and highly capitalized, this is a major goal, just to survive it. And for startups, it's 10x harder. So,
I went to Pier 1 last week, and they're going bankrupt. Yep. I went in and they had going out of business. And I said, oh man, you're closing down this location? And they said, no, our whole company. Like we were on shaky ground before the pandemic, and to be closed for 2 or 3 months, it just killed us. Pier 1.
They've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
You have some very big names, right now struggling with and wondering what the pandemic will do to them and how long it'll take. I mean, you have hospital systems that used to generate billions a year in a month in revenue that have empty corridors, and they don't know how to pay for the infrastructure that they have, and they can't get rid of it. You got airlines, you got hotels, you got tour operators of all kinds, you got all hospitality industry, and we know the statistics right now.
Right.
So I think my advice to the entrepreneurs, including my own team, is get your head down. Don't shoot for simply getting out of this pandemic with your team intact, or at least your core team intact, and the ability to fight again. You don't need to. Of course, there is opportunity to hyper innovate right now in healthcare, no doubt. But without distribution, this hyper innovation isn't going anywhere. So even if you have the best COVID-19 tracking application, if there are no distributors willing to take it up, then you are not going to see the ROI of your investment.
Right.
So if you want to innovate right now, focus on where the distribution channel is or imminent distribution channel you can find. Otherwise, great ideas right now are best put on the shelf to be picked up later. Mm-hmm. So I'm focused on my number one task when this COVID-19 really hit us was to tell everybody, this is our survival plan. We are going to get this together through this. We're going to cut these costs. We're going to put all these ideas on hold. We're going to focus on delivering what we should be delivering to a very well-defined revenue source, and that's it. Everything else, all R&D, all excitement, all cool stuff, we're putting on shelf. Even though we are a hyper-innovative company, that's not where we're going to put our money. We're going to put the money in pulling this company through this crisis. And that has paid off well, because as we are starting to emerge from this, there is a backlog of opportunities that is starting to come out, and the team is ready and able to attack them.
That's
The
fantastic.
second thing that I will say, my personal lesson is, again, what I've been saying throughout the show, be mindful of the stage you are in. I have made mistakes where I've moved too early thinking that product is more mature, the market is ready to distribute me, and fail to price it correctly. So the people around you must match the stage you are in. And don't be afraid to recognize the fact that the team that brings you from stage 1 to stage 2 will probably not be the team that'll bring you from stage 2 to stage 3. This is not disloyalty. This is not a cruelty. It's just that different teams play at different times of your product and company life cycle. They know it. You know it. Be very clinical about it. I need to mature. I need to get focused on my process orientation. I'm going to bring process leaders. I'm no longer in the innovation phase. And you need to be able to tell that to your team. We're going to shift. You are welcome to shift with me, or I'm going to shift the company anyway without you, because I have no other choice. That would be my advice.
Yeah. Gold. Gold, I say. And a lot of these things are, maybe even things that we know, but we need to hear it. We need to hear somebody else say it. We need to see that there are other people facing these same challenges or similar challenges. And then it's, just sharing this wisdom, I think, gives innovators permission to take the action that they probably know deep down inside that they needed to take for a long time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my last question for you is, we touched on this a little bit, just the emotional and the mental wear and tear of entrepreneurship. So how do you stay motivated and inspired during this journey?
Well, there are days when you are not motivated and inspired. You're wondering if you have assumed a certain specific type of lunacy. But I think it always boils down to me, a couple of things. One is, I remind myself of why did we start doing this in the first place? What is, you re-visualize the end goal, the perfect outcome, and you step backwards from that and say, where are we on this journey? And typically what re-inspires me is when I see how far we have come. And if you can, in your mental map, have a sort of a time scale or a journey map, and you can say, wow, 3 years ago, we were literally sitting here in this room with an idea on a whiteboard, with 2 guys, and now we are a 150% company with clients worldwide, and we are, we're now on our way to a certain level. Whatever you have accomplished, whether it's product or people or processes, I mean, you have to remember and measure your progress, because every day is a struggle. And some days you're fatigued and you're wondering how much longer you have to struggle. And we don't measure with the progress you've already made. So look back and measure, go back to the journey the day you started and see how far you've come. And then visualize clearly where you're going. And then the gap doesn't feel so big, because you suddenly realize that you have done a lot. Mm-hmm. The other is just, I find that when I'm truly at a point where I need to decompress or to re-energize, I tend to take some solo time. I tend to go away. And I know it's very difficult for entrepreneurs to do, and it's hard for me. And there's always a temptation to bring somebody along, your executive team, to brainstorm, or your family, because they don't see you very much.
Yeah.
Solo time. That solo time will give you more insights about yourself, how you're dealing with issues, what is really bothering you. On the third day, you'll wake up at 3 a.m. going, now I get it, why I'm upset about something, or why something is not working. So that solo time is very important. Before COVID-19, I used to go hiking into some national forest for the other 2-3 days alone, just so that I could give my brain the chance to re-assimilate all the information that's floating around in it. And the third thing that I find really helps me is coaching and mentors. So join some kind of a peer group network that is made up of executives in your role or higher, whether it's a CEO network or some, And you'd be surprised because entrepreneurs know what they want to do, but what they don't realize is the world moves in waves. What they're doing, other people are doing similar things, maybe in a different industry. So it's very important to find that peer groups, you're not alone in this journey, because it does feel very lonely most of the days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of course, you have staff and you got to pay them and you got to sell to clients and you got to have marketing and you're surrounded by people, but it's a very lonely journey. So you need to know that other people are in a similar journey, just walking 10 inches away from you on their own track, but all these tracks are kind of parallel.
Yeah.
And that to me is always startling, because I always think I'm unique with my issues, with my thoughts, with my ideas, with my challenges. And then the guy next door is basically grappling with 99% of the same issues.
So, Pradeep, that's the whole premise of this show is to have people like you come on, be candid, be transparent about the struggles, not just the wins, but the challenges, the pitfalls. And so that way we can link arms together as like this entrepreneur ecosystem in healthcare and say, I'm not the only one. Okay. I mean, I think that it gives so much encouragement and inspiration to stay the course, because, what we're doing is hard. It's not easy. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the only reason we're doing it is because worth doing.
Yeah. Because there's a patient, a caregiver, there's somebody on the other side of the work that we're doing, that's counting on us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. So as we wrap up, how can our listeners get a hold of you if they have questions and they want to just get in touch with you after the show?
So there is, we have lots of public channels. We have Telegram group for Solve Care. We have info@solve.care, which is continuously monitored. That's an email address we use to gather input. I visit a lot of conferences and speak, at least I used to, and I will probably resume again in the next few months. But I think the info@solve.care and the Solve Care Telegram channel are places where we interact with our worldwide community. We have tens of thousands of people in the channel who continuously talk to us, doctors, clients, patients, idea generators, blockchain, innovators. So we get lots and lots of input from them. But if somebody sends a message, they're saying they need to speak to me, typically within a day or two, I can get back to them.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. I know you're busy working to bring your life-changing innovation to market, and I value your time and your attention. To save time and get the latest episodes on your mobile device automatically, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate everyone who's been sharing the show with friends and colleagues. See you on the next episode of COIQ.